settle into the sleepy mind channel. Tonight, we will explore how the Vikings found their way across oceans long before modern navigation existed. For about 200 years, beginning around the year 800, sailors traveled across some of the most difficult waters in northern Europe, using little more than observation, memory, and their understanding of the natural world. They crossed cold seas beneath changing skies, in wooden ships with no compass, no satellite guidance, and no glowing maps to tell them where they were. The northern waters could become so dangerously cold that falling overboard during a long voyage might quickly turn deadly, especially away from land beneath freezing winds and rough waves. If you enjoy calm educational sleep stories like these, feel free to like and subscribe, and explore the playlist for many more quiet journeys through history, science, and the natural world. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship at night surrounded by open water in every direction. The coastline has disappeared behind you, while darkness stretches across the sea beneath a sky filled with stars. The ship rises and falls gently with the waves, while northern air moves across the deck. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies land, yet nothing about the ocean makes the correct direction obvious. Every part of the sea appears almost identical beneath the night sky. Even today, many people would feel uneasy drifting into open water without modern technology guiding the way. Sailors faced this challenge constantly, and somehow they crossed long distances successfully using only their environment. For people living today, navigation often feels automatic. A phone instantly calculates direction, while satellites orbiting high above the Earth track movement with astonishing precision. Even large ships crossing modern oceans depend heavily on electronics, providing exact location information every moment of the journey. Sailors lived in a different reality. They traveled during a time when human observation itself acted as the primary navigation system. Their survival relied on recognizing patterns in sunlight, stars, waves, wind, and animal behavior, while moving through some of the harshest ocean environments in Europe. The Vikings were skilled seafarers from regions that now include Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Their lives became closely connected to the sea because travel across northern seas allowed movement between distant coastlines, islands, and settlements. Ships carried people, trade goods, and knowledge across regions separated by cold oceans and difficult terrain. Unlike roads on land, the sea provides few permanent visual landmarks once a ship moves far from shore. Forests, rivers, and mountains disappear behind the horizon, while the surface of the ocean changes constantly beneath wind and weather. This makes Viking navigation especially remarkable because human beings naturally prefer stable surroundings. Most people feel calmer when familiar landmarks remain visible nearby. Imagine walking through a city where every street looked identical, while thick fog covered every building after only a short distance. That uncomfortable feeling begins to capture what ocean navigation could become without reliable direction. Sailors needed to maintain orientation across moving water, while clouds, storms, and darkness continuously altered the world around them. Nature became their guide because there were no modern instruments to perform that task. Direction had to be determined through careful observation. The Vikings learned to study repeating natural patterns because those patterns remained reliable even when the ocean appeared empty and featureless. The movement of the sun across the sky, the position of stars during the night, and the behavior of waves all provided information for experienced sailors. The sea and sky became a giant system of clues stretching endlessly across the horizon. One of the most important ideas in Viking navigation was understanding that nature behaves in patterns rather than random chaos. The ocean may appear unpredictable at first, yet many natural systems follow steady rhythms. The sun rises and sets in reliable directions, while stars return to familiar positions each night. Wind influences the movement of waves, while seasonal changes affect weather and ocean conditions. Sailors survived because they learned how to recognize these repeating patterns instead of ignoring them. Modern sailors still rely heavily on awareness, even with advanced technology aboard their ships. Experienced captains continuously observe clouds, changing wind and ocean movement, because nature often provides warning signs before electronics detect problems. Sailors depended on these observations far more deeply because awareness was not simply useful, it was essential for survival. The ocean also changes the way human beings experience movement and direction. On land, a person can stop walking and feel immediate stability beneath their feet. At sea, the surface itself moves constantly. Ships rise and fall with waves while currents shift beneath the hull and wind pushes steadily against sails. Sailors spent long periods living inside this moving environment, while gradually learning how different ocean conditions affected travel. Their ships reflected that understanding. Viking vessels were carefully designed for journeys across northern seas. The hulls remained lightweight enough for efficient movement, while flexible enough to respond smoothly to waves instead of fighting against them completely. This relationship between ship and sea mattered greatly, because survival often depended on adapting to the environment rather than trying to overpower it. The sky became an important source of information available to sailors. During clear weather, sunlight and stars offered clues about direction at sea. Sailors likely spent long hours studying the sky because successful navigation required familiarity with changing patterns overhead. Light itself became a guide, while the horizon created a steady boundary between sea and sky beneath the endless movement of clouds and stars. There is something deeply calming about imagining these slow northern voyages beneath dark skies and ocean air. Wooden ships moving steadily through black water while stars shine above distant waves and the horizon stretches endlessly into darkness. Sailors watching sunlight move carefully across the sky during the day, while memory and observation guide their direction through the open sea. Human beings crossing oceans not through machines or electronics, but through patience, awareness, and trust in nature around them. The Vikings found their way at sea because they learned how to observe nature with extraordinary attention. The sky, ocean, wind, and stars all carried information for those willing to study them carefully enough. Across the northern waters of Europe, navigation became an art shaped by memory, experience, and the quiet patterns hidden within nature itself. For sailors, the sun became a reliable guide anywhere on the ocean. Long before magnetic compasses became common in Europe, people traveling at sea learned that sunlight follows repeating patterns across the sky every day. These patterns offered something incredibly valuable to sailors surrounded by moving water and empty horizons. The ocean itself constantly changes through waves, wind, and weather, yet the movement of the sun remains steady enough that careful observers can use it as a natural reference while traveling away from land. At first glance, this may sound simple to people living today. Most people understand that the sun rises in one direction and sets in another. Yet sailors depended on this knowledge in a much deeper way, because their survival could depend on maintaining the correct heading for many days across cold northern seas. If a ship drifted too far off course, sailors might miss the coastline and continue into dangerous open water, where storms, freezing temperatures, and exhaustion became greater threats. The movement of the sun across the sky creates gradual changes throughout the day. In the morning, sunlight appears low near the eastern horizon, while long shadows stretch across the landscape or across the deck of a ship. As the hours pass, the sun climbs higher, while shadows slowly shift position. By evening, sunlight lowers again toward the western horizon, while the sky begins to darken beneath changing colors and fading light. Sailors observed these daily patterns constantly because they offered information about orientation and movement. Modern people often forget how closely earlier societies observed the sky. Electric lighting, clocks, and digital systems now organize much of daily life, yet for most of human history, the movement of sunlight shaped nearly everything. Farmers watched the sky to understand seasonal changes, while travelers used daylight to judge direction and time. Sailors lived inside this older relationship with nature, where careful observation became part of survival itself. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship during the early morning hours as pale sunlight slowly spreads across northern water. The horizon glows softly while mist drifts above the sea and waves move gently beneath the hull. Sailors studying the position of the sunrise could estimate direction while comparing the changing angle of light against their intended course. Even small observations became useful when crossing open sea with few visible landmarks. One important reason sunlight works so well for navigation is because the Earth rotates in a predictable way. Modern science explains this movement clearly, but sailors did not require advanced astronomy to notice the practical results. They simply observed that the sun followed familiar paths repeatedly across the sky. Day after day, these patterns remained dependable enough to guide movement over distance. Shadows also became important sources of information. As the sun changes position overhead, shadows shift gradually throughout the day. A fixed object aboard a ship might cast light differently during morning and evening hours, while the direction of shadows revealed the changing location of the sun itself. Sailors likely became highly sensitive to these subtle environmental changes because observation sharpened their awareness over time. This type of navigation required patience rather than speed. Modern systems provide instant location information with astonishing precision, yet Viking navigation depended on slowly gathering clues from the environment. Direction was not always determined through one dramatic moment of discovery. Instead, sailors continuously observed sunlight, waves, wind, and sky conditions while adjusting their understanding gradually during the journey. Clouds naturally complicated this process. Northern oceans often experience rapid weather shifts, while thick cloud cover can hide the sun for long periods. Sailors therefore could not rely on sunlight alone every moment of the voyage. Instead, the sun became one part of a much larger system of observation involving stars, ocean conditions, memory, and awareness working together continuously. Modern sailors still use sunlight and the horizon visually, even when advanced equipment remains available aboard ships. Pilots and captains often maintain awareness of the sun's position naturally, because the human brain responds strongly to visual orientation. Sailors develop this awareness to a high degree because observation formed the foundation of navigation itself. The ocean horizon also worked closely with sunlight to support direction. The horizon creates a steady visual boundary, separating sea and sky, even while waves move constantly beneath the ship. By watching where sunlight appeared relative to the horizon, sailors could maintain a more stable sense of orientation during journeys at sea. There is something calming about imagining this slow process unfolding across northern seas. A Viking ship moving steadily beneath pale morning light, while cold air drifts across dark water and the rising sun gradually brightens the horizon. Sailors studying subtle changes in light, while the ship continues through open sea, guided by patterns repeating quietly overhead. Human beings finding direction not through machines or glowing screens, but through careful attention to sunlight crossing the sky. The Vikings learned that nature offers reliable guidance to those willing to observe it patiently enough. The movement of the sun provided information every day, while light itself became part of navigation across northern seas. Through experience, memory, and continuous observation, sailors transformed ordinary daylight into an important tool for crossing vast stretches of open sea. For sailors, understanding the position of the sun meant understanding direction itself. The sky became a giant moving reference system above the ocean, while sunlight revealed orientation throughout the day. On land, people can rely on roads, rivers, or mountain ranges to help maintain direction, yet the sea removes most of those familiar guides completely. Once a ship traveled far enough from shore, the horizon appeared almost endless in every direction. In that empty environment, the movement of the sun provided one dependable pattern available to sailors crossing northern waters. One of the most basic but important observations involved the rising and setting of the sun. Each morning, sunlight appeared near the eastern horizon, while evening brought fading light toward the west. This repeating pattern allowed sailors to estimate direction even without modern instruments. A sailor watching sunrise could begin forming a mental map of orientation while comparing the ship's movement against the position of the light. Throughout the day, the changing location of the sun continued providing additional clues about direction and travel. Today, many people know these ideas in theory, but rarely depend on them practically. Modern navigation systems quietly calculate direction in the background, while roads and signs constantly guide movement. Imagine suddenly losing every electronic system during a long journey through unfamiliar territory. Even simple direction could become uncertain quickly. Sailors faced this reality continuously whenever they moved beyond visible coastlines into open sea. The midday position of the sun also carried information. Around the middle portion of the day, sunlight reaches its highest point in the sky before gradually lowering again toward evening. Sailors likely observed these daily changes closely because the angle of sunlight shifted in reliable ways over time. Even without scientific instruments, careful observation allowed experienced travelers to recognize patterns that supported navigation across long distances. The farther north a person travels, the more unusual sunlight patterns can appear during different seasons. In northern regions connected to Viking travel, Summer days can become remarkably long, while winter daylight grows extremely limited. These changing seasonal conditions made awareness even more important because sailors needed familiarity with how light behaved across different times of year. Shadows became another useful source of information during daylight travel. Every object exposed to sunlight creates shadows whose direction changes gradually as the sun moves overhead. A pole aboard a ship, the mast itself, or even equipment resting on the deck could cast shifting shadows throughout the day. Sailors likely paid close attention to these changes because shadows offered indirect evidence about the position of the sun even when looking upward became difficult due to bright light or weather changes. Modern people still experience this effect naturally, without always thinking about it consciously. During early morning hours, long shadows stretch across streets and buildings, while midday sunlight produces much shorter shadows beneath objects. By evening, shadows lengthen once again while the sun lowers toward the horizon. Sailors transformed these ordinary observations into practical navigation tools through repetition and experience. The ocean environment made this awareness especially important because water itself reflects light continuously. Sunlight shimmering across waves can create changing visual conditions throughout the day, while clouds and weather influence brightness and visibility constantly. Sailors crossing open water learned how to interpret these shifts while maintaining awareness of the ship's orientation relative to the sun and horizon. Observation at sea required continuous attention rather than occasional quick glances. A Viking voyage might last many days beneath changing skies, while weather altered visibility from hour to hour. Sailors therefore remained mentally connected to their environment because navigation depended on noticing gradual changes before they became serious problems. The movement of sunlight across the sky became part of daily awareness during long journeys through northern waters. This kind of navigation also demanded memory. Sailors needed to remember how the sun behaved during earlier portions of the journey while comparing present conditions against previous observations. Human memory became part of the navigation system itself because successful travel depended on recognizing familiar patterns over time. Sailors developed this awareness gradually through voyages and accumulated experience across difficult ocean environments. Cloud cover naturally complicated these observations. Thick northern clouds could hide the sun entirely, while storms created uncertainty across the sea. Sailors therefore could not depend on a single clue alone. Instead, they combined sunlight observations with knowledge of waves, wind, stars, and ocean behavior to maintain direction as conditions changed during the journey. There is something peaceful about imagining these long northern days unfolding slowly above a Viking ship crossing cold ocean water. Pale sunlight drifting across waves while the horizon stretches endlessly into the distance, and shadows move quietly across the wooden deck. Sailors studying the sky while the ship rises gently with the sea beneath them. Human beings learning to read direction from ordinary sunlight and repeating natural patterns. The Vikings discovered that the position of the sun could reveal far more than simple daylight alone. Morning light, evening shadows, and the changing angle of the sky all provided clues about orientation at sea. Through patience, observation, and memory, sailors transformed the movement of sunlight into a powerful guide, capable of leading ships across northern seas. Sailors understood that navigation depended less on finding one perfect answer and more on continuously observing small changes in their environment. The ocean rarely provides clear signs pointing directly toward land, yet the natural world constantly offers subtle information through light, movement, and repeating patterns. Sailors learn to estimate direction by paying close attention to these gradual changes while comparing one observation against another during the journey. Sunlight became especially valuable because it changed in predictable ways during the day. Morning light carries a different quality than evening light, while shadows shift slowly across the deck of a ship as the sun moves overhead. Sailors likely became extremely familiar with these changes because repeated ocean travel sharpened their awareness over time. What might appear ordinary to most people became meaningful information for experienced navigators crossing open water. This process resembles how modern people learn familiar routes through repetition. A person driving the same road every day gradually notices subtle details without consciously trying to memorize them. Certain buildings appear at particular moments, while shadows fall differently, depending on the time of day, and seasons change the quality of light across the landscape. Sailors developed a similar relationship with the sea and sky. Repeated observation slowly built deep awareness. Direction often had to be estimated rather than measured precisely. Modern systems provide exact coordinates almost instantly, yet Viking navigation relied on interpretation. Sailors compared the position of sunlight against memory, wave direction, wind conditions, and the movement of the ship itself. Navigation therefore became an ongoing process of observation and adjustment instead of a fixed calculation. The sky acted as a constant reference above the ocean. Even when clouds covered portions of the horizon, the larger movement of daylight across the atmosphere still revealed information. Brightness shifted gradually, while changing angles of sunlight altered the appearance of waves and water throughout the day. Sailors learned to notice these environmental clues because survival often depended on maintaining awareness during long periods away from land. At sea, small errors in direction can grow larger over time. A ship drifting slightly off course during many hours of travel might eventually miss its intended destination completely. Sailors therefore needed steady attention rather than occasional observation. Every part of the environment became important because navigation depended on maintaining orientation continuously across changing ocean conditions. The horizon itself worked closely with sunlight to support this awareness. On calm days, the line separating sea and sky appears remarkably stable, despite the movement of waves beneath the ship. Sailors could observe how sunlight interacted with the horizon during different times of day, while comparing the ship's heading against those visual references. Even subtle changes in brightness or angle could help reinforce direction on long voyages. Modern pilots still use visual orientation naturally, even with advanced instruments available inside aircraft. The human brain responds strongly to the position of the horizon because stable reference points help maintain balance and direction. Sailors relied on this same relationship between vision and orientation while crossing open sea without electronic guidance systems available to them. Light also changes according to weather conditions. Thin clouds soften sunlight, while storms darken portions of the sky and reduce visibility across the ocean. Sailors learned how these changes affected navigation because northern waters often experience rapidly shifting weather. Observation needed to remain flexible since the environment itself constantly evolved during the voyage. One fascinating part of Viking navigation is how deeply connected it remained to ordinary natural experiences. Modern people still watch sunsets, notice shadows, and observe changing light during the day, yet most no longer depend on these patterns for survival. Sailors transformed simple awareness into a sophisticated system for maintaining direction across long distances. This required patience and calm attention rather than urgency. The sea cannot be rushed safely, especially in wooden ships crossing northern waters. Sailors spent long hours observing the same horizon beneath changing skies, while gradually building understanding through repetition and memory. Navigation unfolded slowly because the environment revealed information gradually throughout the day. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship during late afternoon, while sunlight stretches softly across dark waves and long shadows move across the wooden deck. The air feels cold, while the horizon glows beneath pale northern light, and the ship continues steadily through open water. Sailors quietly studying the sky, while subtle changes in brightness and shadow help maintain orientation away from land. Human beings learning to travel long distances by observing the ordinary movement of daylight itself. The Vikings discovered that light could guide movement across the sea in surprisingly reliable ways. The sky provided constant reference while changing sunlight revealed orientation throughout the day. Through experience, observation, and careful interpretation of natural patterns, sailors transformed ordinary daylight into a dependable tool for crossing the northern oceans. When daylight disappeared beneath the horizon, sailors could no longer depend on the sun to guide direction across the sea. Darkness transformed the ocean completely. Familiar colors vanished while cold black water blended almost seamlessly into the night sky beyond the ship. Yet even during these dark hours, nature continued offering guidance overhead. The stars became an important tool for navigation because the night sky contains patterns that remain remarkably stable across time. For people living in brightly lit modern cities, it can be difficult to imagine how powerful the stars once appeared. Electric lighting now hides much of the night sky for millions of people around the world. Sailors experienced a different relationship with darkness. Far from land beneath clear northern skies, thousands of stars would stretch across the atmosphere with extraordinary brightness. The ocean itself reflected portions of that light, while the horizon disappeared into endless darkness around the ship. At first glance, the stars may appear random and confusing, yet careful observation reveals that many star patterns remain fixed relative to one another night after night. Certain groups of stars maintain recognizable shapes, while the entire sky seems to rotate slowly overhead as the Earth moves beneath it. Sailors learn to recognize these repeating patterns because stable reference points became incredibly valuable on long voyages. The North Star became especially important for navigation in the Northern Hemisphere. Unlike many other stars that appear to move steadily across the sky during the night, the North Star remains positioned close to true north. To observers beneath northern skies, this creates the impression that the star stays nearly fixed in place, while other stars rotate gradually around it. Sailors likely relied heavily on this stable point, because it provided a dependable reference for direction after sunset. Modern navigation systems now determine north instantly through electronic instruments, yet the North Star offered something similar to earlier sailors, through simple observation alone. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship beneath a cold, clear sky, while waves move softly against the hull and dark ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon. Above the ship, the stars drift slowly through the night, while one bright point remains steady in the northern sky. That stable light could help maintain orientation at sea, away from land. Night navigation required patience because stars move gradually across the sky over many hours. Sailors needed familiarity with these patterns in order to interpret them correctly. The night sky became something to study carefully rather than simply admire. Repeated observations slowly transformed groups of stars into useful guides connected to memory and direction. This process resembles how experienced hikers learn familiar landscapes during daylight travel. At first, a forest path may seem confusing and uncertain, yet over time specific landmarks become recognizable and useful for orientation. Sailors developed a similar relationship with the stars. Repetition allowed the sky itself to become familiar territory, despite the constant darkness surrounding the ocean. Conditions at sea could make these observations both beautiful and difficult. Calm nights with clear skies offered excellent visibility, while storms and heavy cloud cover could hide the stars completely. Northern weather often changes quickly, meaning sailors needed flexibility rather than dependence on one single method of navigation. The stars became one part of a larger system involving sunlight, waves, wind and awareness working together continuously. The motion of the ship itself added another challenge. Viking vessels rose and fell with the movement of the ocean, while wind and waves shifted the deck beneath the sailors' feet. Observing stars accurately aboard a moving ship required balance, concentration, and experience. Sailors likely became deeply familiar with the rhythm of ocean movement because navigation demanded steady attention even during hard conditions. The night sky also created a powerful emotional atmosphere on long voyages. Far from land beneath dark skies, sailors would experience enormous silence broken only by wind, waves, and the movement of the ship itself. Stars stretched endlessly overhead, while ocean air drifted across the deck, and distant horizons vanished into darkness. Navigation during these moments required trust in observation and memory, because little else remained visible around them. Modern sailors and astronomers still use stars for orientation and study, because celestial patterns remain remarkably dependable over long periods of time. The same stars visible to sailors centuries ago continue shining above modern oceans tonight. Human technology has changed dramatically, yet the night sky itself remains deeply familiar across generations. There is something peaceful about imagining these quiet northern nights at sea. A Viking ship moving slowly beneath countless stars, while dark waves roll softly against the hull and cold air drifts across the open water. Sailors studying the sky carefully, while familiar patterns guide their direction through darkness. Human beings crossing oceans using light from distant stars that had already shone above the earth for countless years before the first Viking ship ever touched the sea. The Vikings learned that the stars could provide stability within an environment that constantly moved and changed. Fixed patterns in the night sky helped sailors maintain orientation after sunset, while the North Star offered a dependable reference available across northern seas. Through observation, memory, and patience, sailors transformed the darkness of night into another guide for crossing the open sea. For sailors traveling across northern seas, the North Star offered something extremely valuable in an environment filled with constant motion and uncertainty. The ocean shifted endlessly beneath the ship, while weather changed rapidly across the horizon, yet the North Star appeared almost motionless in the night sky. This steady point of light helped sailors maintain orientation during darkness when many other visual references disappeared. The usefulness of the North Star comes from its position high above the northern part of the Earth. Because it sits almost directly above the planet's northern axis, the star appears to remain relatively fixed, while other stars seem to move gradually around it throughout the night. Sailors did not require modern astronomy to understand the practical importance of this observation. Through repeated experience, they simply learned that one bright star remained dependable for identifying north during clear nights at sea. Imagine how comforting this stability may have felt during a long ocean voyage. Darkness surrounded the ship, while wind crossed the deck and waves moved beneath the hull without pause. The horizon itself nearly disappeared into black water, while clouds drifted slowly across the sky overhead. Yet somewhere above the northern horizon remained a steady point of light that sailors could return to repeatedly for orientation. In a world where almost everything else moved constantly, the North Star became a reliable companion. Navigation during darkness required calm observation because the sea offers few visible clues at night. During daylight, sailors could study sunlight, shadows, and changing brightness across the horizon. Night travel depended much more heavily on memory and familiarity with the sky itself. Sailors learned to recognize repeating star patterns because those patterns created order within the darkness above the ocean. Modern people still experience this feeling when looking at the stars away from city lights. At first, the night sky can appear overwhelming and random. Yet after spending enough time observing it, familiar patterns begin emerging naturally. Certain groups of stars become easier to recognize, while the movement of the sky itself starts to feel more understandable. Sailors developed this awareness to a high degree because their journeys depended on it. The stars also move gradually and predictably across the night. As hours pass, constellations appear to shift position while rotating slowly around the North Star. Sailors likely learned how these patterns changed during different portions of the night because observation over time revealed dependable rhythms overhead. The sky itself became a clock of sorts, while the motion of stars provided additional information on long voyages. One remarkable aspect of ancient navigation is how deeply connected it remained to patience. Modern technology encourages instant answers, while electronics provide constant updates every second. Sailors gathered information more slowly. Direction emerged through careful observation, repeated over many hours beneath changing skies and weather conditions. The process required trust in memory and familiarity, rather than immediate certainty. Cloud cover naturally complicated navigation at sea. Northern weather often changes quickly, while storms and thick clouds can hide the stars entirely for long periods. Sailors therefore needed flexibility because the environment never remained perfectly stable. When stars disappeared behind clouds, sailors relied more heavily on waves, wind direction, memory and previous observations until clearer skies returned. The movement of the ship itself also influenced navigation during darkness. Viking vessels rose and fell with the sea, while wind pushed against sails and currents shifted beneath the hull. Looking upward at stars from a moving deck required balance and concentration because the horizon itself constantly changed position relative to the observer. Experienced sailors gradually learned how to interpret the sky despite this continuous motion. The North Star did not provide exact location information the way modern systems do today. Instead, it offered orientation. Sailors still needed experience and awareness to determine how their course related to coastlines, weather, and intended destinations. The stars formed one important part of a larger navigation system built from observation of the natural world. There is also something deeply human about the way earlier sailors depended on the night sky. For thousands of years before electronic technology existed, human beings looked upward searching for stability, direction, and understanding. Sailors crossing dark waters became part of that long relationship between people and the stars overhead. The same sky guiding their journeys still stretches above modern oceans tonight. Imagine a Viking ship traveling quietly through black northern water beneath clear skies filled with stars. The wooden hull creaks softly while cold air drifts across the deck and distant waves reflect faint starlight beneath the horizon. Sailors watching familiar patterns overhead, while one steady star remains fixed in the north, guiding their orientation through darkness. Human beings crossing oceans through memory, observation, and trust in repeating patterns hidden within the night sky. The Vikings discovered that the stars could create stability even in the middle of the open sea. The North Star offered dependable orientation, while repeating patterns overhead helped sailors maintain direction after sunset. Through patience, familiarity, and careful observation, Viking navigation transformed the night sky into a reliable guide available across the cold northern seas. For sailors crossing open sea, the horizon became an important visual guide anywhere at sea. Far from land, where coastlines and landmarks disappear completely, the horizon creates a steady line separating the sea below from the sky above. This boundary may appear simple at first, yet for sailors navigating vast stretches of water, it provided stability inside an environment filled with constant motion. The horizon helped sailors maintain orientation while traveling through landscapes where nearly everything else seemed to shift continuously. On land, direction often feels easier because stable objects surround people constantly. Roads remain fixed while mountains, forests and buildings provide reliable points of reference. At sea, those familiar guides vanish. Water stretches outward in every direction, while waves rise and fall beneath the ship without pause. The horizon therefore becomes one stable visual feature available on long voyages. Modern people still experience the calming effect of the horizon near coastlines or large open lakes. Looking outward across distant water often creates a feeling of openness and balance, because the human brain naturally responds to stable visual boundaries. Sailors depended on this relationship much more deeply because maintaining awareness of the horizon supported navigation itself. The horizon also helped sailors judge the movement of the ship through the ocean. Even while waves lifted and lowered the vessel continuously, the broader line separating sea and sky remained relatively stable in the distance. By comparing the ship's direction against the horizon, sailors could better maintain a consistent course at sea. This became especially important on long voyages where small directional errors could gradually grow much larger over time. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship beneath pale northern light, while wind moves steadily across the deck and dark waves rise gently beneath the hull. Far ahead stretches a long, unbroken line where the ocean meets the sky. The ship moves constantly while water shifts endlessly around it, yet the horizon remains calm and steady in the distance. Sailors watching that line carefully could maintain orientation while traveling far beyond visible land. The horizon changes appearance according to weather and light conditions. Calm seas sometimes create sharp, clear boundaries, while storms and mist blur the separation between water and sky. Sailors learned how these changes affected visibility because navigation depended heavily on continuous observation. A clear horizon provided confidence and stability, while poor visibility introduced greater uncertainty during travel. This relationship between stability and movement became central to ocean navigation. The sea itself constantly moves through waves, currents, and weather patterns, yet sailors needed reliable references in order to understand their own direction within that shifting environment. The horizon helped create that reference by providing a broad visual boundary against which movement could be interpreted more clearly. Modern pilots experience something similar while flying aircraft. The horizon remains critically important because it helps maintain orientation and balance during movement through the sky. Even with advanced instruments available, visual awareness of the horizon continues supporting safe travel. Sailors relied on this same human relationship with visual stability while crossing northern oceans without electronic equipment. The horizon also works closely with sunlight and stars during navigation. Sailors could observe where the sun rose or set relative to the horizon, while nighttime stars appeared above that same boundary after darkness arrived. The line between sea and sky therefore became part of a much larger environmental system involving light, weather, and celestial observation working together during the journey. Long periods at sea likely sharpened sailors' awareness of subtle visual changes along the horizon. Distant weather systems sometimes altered the appearance of the sky, while approaching land could eventually interrupt the smooth line separating sea and sky far ahead. Experienced sailors learned to notice these details because even small visual differences might provide information on long voyages. The emotional experience of watching the horizon also shaped life at sea. During calm weather, endless open water could feel peaceful and almost hypnotic beneath changing light and moving clouds. During storms, however, the same horizon might become frightening as dark skies and rough seas surrounded the ship with uncertainty. Sailors experienced both beauty and danger while traveling through these environments, guided largely by observation. There is something deeply peaceful about imagining a Viking ship moving steadily across northern water beneath a wide open sky. Waves rolling softly beneath the hull, while pale sunlight stretches across the horizon and distant clouds drift slowly above the sea. Sailors quietly studying the line separating ocean and sky while maintaining direction through patience and awareness. Human beings crossing long distances while guided by one of the simplest visual features in nature, The Vikings learned that the horizon could provide stability inside an environment defined by constant motion. By maintaining direction relative to the line between sea and sky, sailors improved their ability to navigate at sea away from land. Through observation, memory, and careful attention to the natural world, the horizon became a dependable guide, available on long voyages across northern seas. Maintaining direction across the ocean required constant attention because the sea never remains still for long. Wind shifts across the surface, while waves rise beneath the ship, and weather changes continuously around the horizon. Sailors, therefore, could not simply choose a direction once and ignore the environment afterward. Navigation depended on continuous observation. Every hour at sea required sailors to compare the movement of the ship against sunlight, stars, waves, and the horizon in order to maintain a steady course at sea. The horizon remained especially important because it provided a stable visual reference inside an environment filled with motion. Sailors likely spent long hours quietly studying the line between sea and sky while adjusting their understanding of direction during the voyage. Even subtle changes in the appearance of the horizon could influence navigation because visibility conditions constantly shifted across northern seas. Modern people often underestimate how difficult it can become to maintain direction without stable landmarks nearby. Imagine walking through thick fog across an open field where every direction appears nearly identical. Without roads, signs, or distant buildings, even experienced people can slowly drift off course without realizing it. Sailors face similar challenges across the ocean, except the environment beneath them moved constantly, while weather and darkness added further uncertainty. Clear weather made navigation easier because sunlight, stars, and the horizon remained visible for long distances across the sea. During calm conditions, the boundary between ocean and sky could appear remarkably sharp and stable. Sailors could compare the ship's movement against these visual references while maintaining orientation more confidently during the journey. Yet northern oceans rarely remain calm forever. Clouds, rain, and storms regularly altered visibility, while changing wind conditions influenced the movement of the ship itself. Fog could become especially dangerous during ocean travel. Thick mists sometimes erase the horizon almost completely, while reducing visibility across the water to short distances. In these moments, sailors lost one of their most dependable visual references, while the sea continued moving beneath the ship without pause. Sailors therefore needed flexibility because navigation could never depend entirely on perfect conditions. Storms created even greater difficulty. Dark clouds covered the sky while heavy waves pushed against the hull, and strong winds altered the ship's movement across the water. During severe weather, sunlight and stars might disappear behind thick cloud cover, while the horizon became difficult or impossible to distinguish clearly. Sailors survived these conditions through experience, memory, and continuous awareness rather than certainty. Modern ships crossing rough seas still experience many of these same challenges despite advanced technology. Captains and crews remain highly aware of changing visibility because weather can influence navigation even when electronics remain available. Sailors depended on environmental observation far more heavily because nature itself acted as their primary source of information during the voyage. The vastness of the ocean also shaped the emotional experience of navigation. Far from land, the sea creates a feeling of enormous open space, unlike almost any environment on Earth. The horizon stretches endlessly outward, while waves move beneath the ship in every direction, and the sky expands overhead without interruption. Sailors spent long periods living within this immense open world, guided mostly by observation and memory. There is something both peaceful and unsettling about that kind of emptiness. During calm weather, the ocean can feel almost quiet and endless, beneath soft light and drifting clouds. During storms or darkness, however, the same open space may feel isolating and uncertain, because familiar landmarks disappear completely. Sailors learned how to remain calm inside these shifts, because emotional control mattered greatly during difficult voyages. Continuous observation became a habit rather than a separate task. Sailors watched the horizon while listening to wind conditions and studying wave movement beneath the ship. Changes in light, visibility, and weather all carried information that could influence navigation. Successful travel depended on gathering many small observations together rather than relying on one single clue alone. This type of awareness resembles how experienced hikers or outdoors people move through unfamiliar environments today. Skilled travelers continuously observe terrain, weather, and surrounding conditions, even when following familiar paths. Sailors develop this awareness to a high degree because open sea travel demanded constant interpretation of the world around them. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship during a cold northern evening, while mist drifts low across the water and the horizon fades softly into grey distance. The ship moves steadily through dark waves, while sailors study changing light and weather, carefully searching for stability within the open sea. Human beings maintaining direction, not through glowing instruments or digital systems, but through patience, memory, and careful observation of nature itself. The Vikings understood that navigation depended on continuous awareness because the ocean constantly changes. The horizon, weather, and visibility all influenced direction, while sailors adjusted gradually to shifting conditions during the journey. Through steady observation and experience, Viking navigation transformed the vast open sea from an empty wilderness into a world filled with subtle clues, guiding movement across northern oceans. For sailors, the ocean itself became a source of information. Most people looking across the sea simply notice moving water, yet experienced sailors learned that waves, currents, and surface patterns could reveal important clues about weather, wind, and direction. The sea was never truly random. Beneath the endless motion existed repeating behaviors shaped by natural forces acting across long distances. Sailors survived long voyages, partly because they learned how to interpret these patterns while traveling away from land. Ocean conditions influence navigation constantly because wind and water remain deeply connected. Strong winds push across the surface of the sea and gradually shape the movement of waves over time. When sailors observed the direction and rhythm of waves carefully, they could gather information about weather shifts and the broader conditions surrounding the ship. The sea itself became part of the navigation system. Modern people still experience this relationship naturally near coastlines. Even standing on a beach, it becomes possible to notice that waves often arrive in repeating directions, depending on wind and weather conditions farther out at sea. Sailors develop this awareness to a high degree because understanding the behavior of water could support survival during difficult ocean travel. Different kinds of waves also carry different information. Calm rolling waves may reflect stable weather conditions, while rough irregular water can suggest stronger winds or changing storms nearby. Experienced sailors learn that the ocean has rhythms much like weather or seasons on land. Sailors likely spent countless hours observing the movement of water, because small changes in wave behavior could influence navigation and safety on long voyages. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship beneath grey northern skies, while dark waves move steadily beneath the hull. Wind pushes softly against the sail, while long lines of water rise and fall across the open sea, stretching toward the horizon. To inexperienced eyes, the ocean may appear chaotic, yet experienced sailors could notice patterns within that movement while comparing wave direction against wind and the heading of the ship itself. The shape of Viking ships reflected this close relationship with the sea. Their lightweight, flexible hulls allowed movement through waves rather than trying to resist every motion completely. The ships responded to changing water conditions, while sailors adjusted steering according to wind, waves, and ocean movement around them. Navigation therefore depended partly on understanding how the ship interacted with the sea itself. Waves can continue moving in one direction even after local winds begin changing. This creates information for experienced sailors because ocean movement often preserves evidence of earlier weather conditions across large areas of water. Sailors likely learned how to compare present wind against older wave patterns while interpreting what those conditions might reveal about the environment. Modern oceanographers still study wave behavior carefully because the movement of water carries much information about weather systems and environmental conditions. Sailors did not possess scientific instruments capable of measuring these forces precisely, yet long experience at sea allowed them to develop understanding through direct observation alone. Currents beneath the surface also influence travel. Ocean water moves continuously through large circulation systems shaped by wind, temperature, and the rotation of the Earth. Sailors may not have understood the scientific causes behind these currents, but they certainly experienced their effects during voyages. Ships could drift gradually while crossing open water, even when sailors believed they were maintaining a steady heading. This constant movement required flexibility. Viking navigation did not involve following perfectly straight, invisible lines across the sea. Instead, sailors continuously adjusted according to changing environmental conditions while interpreting information from waves, wind, and weather. Navigation became an ongoing conversation between human observation and the natural world surrounding the ship. The sound of the ocean likely became important as well. Calm water creates different rhythms against the hull compared with rough weather or changing wind conditions. Experienced sailors often develop strong awareness of these subtle sensory changes because the sea communicates through movement, sound, and physical motion continuously throughout a voyage. There is also something deeply calming about the repeating motion of waves themselves. The ocean rises and falls in endless rhythm, while light shifts across the surface beneath changing skies. Sailors spent long periods surrounded by this constant movement, while ships drifted steadily through northern waters. The sea could become dangerous during storms, yet during calmer conditions, it also created an almost hypnotic sense of rhythm and motion. Imagine a Viking ship traveling through open sea during the quiet hours before evening. Long dark waves roll beneath the hull, while cold air moves softly across the deck and pale light stretches low across the horizon. Sailors watching the movement of water carefully while the sea itself provides clues about direction and weather beyond visible distance. Human beings learning to understand the language of waves through patience and repeated experience. The Vikings discovered that the ocean carried information for those willing to observe it closely enough. Waves reflected wind, while currents influenced movement, and changing water conditions revealed patterns hidden beneath the surface of the sea. Through careful observation, memory, and experience, sailors transformed the motion of the ocean itself into another guide for crossing the northern waters. The ocean is never exactly the same from one day to the next. Wind changes direction, while storms rise and fade across distant water, and waves shift according to conditions unfolding far beyond the visible horizon. Sailors understood this deeply because their journeys depended on recognizing how the sea changed over time. Navigation was not simply about memorizing one fixed set of rules. It required constant interpretation of a living environment that moved and evolved continuously around the ship. A calm sea during the morning could become rough and unpredictable by evening. Thin clouds appearing near the horizon might slowly grow into larger weather systems, while changing winds altered the movement of waves beneath the hull. Sailors therefore needed patience and flexibility because successful navigation depended on adjusting to these shifts rather than resisting them. Modern weather forecasting allows people to prepare for storms days in advance, using satellites, radar, and computer systems, studying large amounts of environmental information. Sailors possessed none of these tools. Their understanding came directly from observation and memory. They watched clouds, wind, waves, and changing light carefully because nature itself provided the only information available on long voyages. Experience became one of the most valuable forms of knowledge at sea. A person crossing the ocean for the first time might struggle to recognize subtle differences in wave patterns or weather conditions. Experienced sailors, however, gradually learned how small environmental changes often signaled larger developments ahead. A shift in wind, a change in cloud formation, or unusual movement in the sea might suggest changes long before a storm actually arrived. This type of awareness resembles how experienced outdoors people learn to read the environment today. Skilled hikers often notice subtle weather changes before rainfall begins, while fishermen learn how wind and water conditions influence the behavior of the sea. Sailors develop this awareness through exposure to northern oceans, where survival often depended on recognizing patterns quickly enough to respond safely. The movement of water itself became a form of communication. Waves reflected wind direction, while currents influenced the motion of the ship beneath the surface. Sailors learned how to compare these different forms of movement against one another because the sea rarely behaves randomly. Nature constantly produces patterns shaped by physical forces acting together across long distances. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship during an overcast afternoon, while waves move differently than they had earlier in the day. The wind shifts slightly colder, while dark clouds begin gathering far beyond the horizon, and the surface of the ocean changes rhythm beneath the hull. Experienced sailors studying these conditions carefully might recognize signs of weather changes long before the storm actually arrived. The ability to interpret nature improved gradually through repetition. Sailors likely spent years developing familiarity with northern waters, while learning how certain conditions connected to later outcomes. This knowledge was not gained instantly. It accumulated slowly, voyage after voyage, while memory sharpened understanding of the environment over time. Knowledge at sea was also shared between people. Experienced navigators passed observations and understanding to younger sailors, while stories about dangerous conditions and successful routes helped preserve information across generations. Viking navigation therefore depended not only on individual skill, but also on accumulated experience carried through communities connected to the sea. Changing conditions required emotional control as well as practical skill. Storms, fog, and rough water could create fear or uncertainty on long voyages away from land. Sailors needed calm judgment because panic makes observation more difficult, while clear thinking supports better decisions during dangerous conditions. The ocean rewarded patience and awareness far more often than impulsive reactions. Nature signaled direction in many subtle ways. Wind shaped waves, while sunlight changed across clouds, and shifting water reflected conditions developing across the sea. Sailors gradually learned how these environmental systems connected together. Navigation, therefore, became less about controlling the ocean and more about understanding how to move within the larger patterns already unfolding around the ship. Even today, sailors often describe the ocean as feeling alive because conditions change continuously through movement, sound, and weather. Sailors spent enormous portions of their lives inside this constantly changing environment while learning to recognize its rhythms through direct experience. There is something deeply calming about imagining these long northern voyages unfolding beneath changing skies and restless water. A Viking ship rising gently with dark waves while wind shifts softly across the sail and distant clouds gather slowly near the horizon. Sailors quietly studying the movement of the ocean while nature itself reveals subtle clues about weather, direction, and the world beyond visible distance. The Vikings discovered that experience sharpened the ability to interpret the sea. Changing ocean conditions, shifting wind, and the movement of water all carried information for those willing to observe patiently enough. Through memory, repetition, and careful awareness, sailors transformed the constantly changing ocean into a guide capable of supporting journeys across northern seas. Far from land, sailors searched constantly for signs that coastlines might be nearby, even when nothing visible appeared along the horizon. One of the most useful clues came from birds moving across the ocean. Certain species spend much of their time near shore because they depend on land for nesting, food, or rest. Sailors observing the appearance and behavior of these birds could gather information about the environment while traveling through open water. Today, most people think of birds simply as part of the natural scenery near oceans and coastlines. For sailors, however, birds sometimes acted almost like moving signals within the environment. A lone bird flying far from shore might suggest one thing, while repeated sightings of certain species could suggest something different. Observation became important because patterns in animal behavior often reflected geography hidden beyond visible distance. Modern sailors still pay attention to birds in certain situations because wildlife often responds to environmental conditions long before humans fully notice them. Fishermen sometimes locate schools of fish by watching seabirds gathering over the water, while coastal birds frequently remain within limited ranges near land. Sailors likely developed similar awareness through generations of repeated ocean travel. The direction of flight could also provide clues. A bird moving steadily toward one area of the horizon might suggest nearby coastline beyond visible range, while groups of birds traveling in similar directions could reinforce that possibility. Sailors crossing cold northern seas learn to notice these subtle signs because open sea rarely provides clear information directly. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship during a grey northern morning while wind drifts softly across the deck and dark waves roll beneath the hull. The horizon appears empty in every direction until a bird suddenly passes overhead, moving steadily westward toward distant mist. Later, another appears traveling the same direction. Experienced sailors observing these patterns might begin suspecting that land lies somewhere beyond visible distance across the water. Bird behavior also changes according to weather and time of day. Some species remain active near coastlines during daylight, while others travel outward temporarily before returning toward land later. Sailors likely became familiar with many of these patterns because observation gradually revealed connections between animal movement and geography. This type of awareness resembles how experienced hikers notice signs of nearby water or changing terrain through animal activity in forests and wilderness areas today. Human beings often overlook subtle patterns in nature because modern life depends heavily on technology rather than direct observation. Sailors survived partly because they maintained close attention to nature surrounding them every day. The appearance of birds after long periods of empty ocean may also have carried emotional importance during difficult voyages. After days surrounded only by waves, wind, and distant sky, signs of animal life connected to land could offer reassurance that coastlines might not be far away. Even small clues became meaningful during journeys across vast stretches of cold water. Birds were never perfect guides on their own. Storms, weather, and migration patterns could influence movement, while some birds traveled far greater distances from shore than others. Sailors therefore combined animal observations with knowledge of stars, sunlight, waves, and weather rather than relying on any single clue alone. Navigation remained a process of gathering many small observations together over time. The northern seas connected to Viking travel supported large populations of seabirds because rugged coastlines, cliffs, and islands created suitable nesting environments across northern Europe and the North Atlantic. Sailors traveling through these regions would likely encounter many species whose behavior gradually became familiar through voyages over the years. Nature often reveals information indirectly rather than openly. Sailors learned how to interpret these subtle environmental signals because survival at sea depended on recognizing connections between living creatures, weather, and geography. Birds moving across the horizon became part of a much larger system of observation, linking ocean travel to the natural rhythms of the world around them. There is a quieter kind of comfort in imagining a bird appearing above the ocean after many days surrounded only by waves and sky. A single shape crossing northern air, while the ship continues through grey water beneath drifting clouds. Sailors lifting their attention toward the movement overhead, knowing that even small signs of life may carry meaning out here, where land remains hidden beyond the horizon. The Vikings understood that navigation did not depend only on the sky or sea alone. Animal behavior could also reveal information about nearby geography and changing conditions. Through patience, memory, and close observation of the living world around them, sailors learned how birds themselves could become part of the long search for direction across the open sea. Sailors lived in a world where nature constantly provided information to anyone patient enough to observe it carefully. The sea, sky, weather, and animal life all formed parts of a larger environmental system filled with subtle clues about direction. Modern navigation systems separate people from much of this awareness because electronic instruments perform the work automatically in the background. Sailors depended directly on observation instead. Their understanding of the world expanded through continuous attention to the environment. Nature rarely communicates through obvious signals. Instead, information appears through patterns repeated over time. The direction of waves, the behavior of birds, the movement of clouds, and the changing quality of light all reveal connections between weather, geography, and the sea itself. Sailors learned how to recognize these relationships because survival relied on interpreting small environmental changes before they became larger problems. This kind of awareness grows gradually. A person unfamiliar with the ocean may notice only wind and water, while an experienced sailor begins recognizing far more detail within the same environment. Subtle differences in wave movement, cloud height, or bird activity slowly become meaningful through repetition and memory. Sailors likely developed extraordinary observational skill because long voyages required constant environmental attention. Modern people still experience smaller versions of this process in daily life. Farmers often notice approaching weather changes before forecasts arrive, while experienced fishermen recognize patterns in water and wildlife that suggest shifts beneath the surface. Human beings naturally become more aware of environments they depend upon closely. Sailors spent much of their lives surrounded by the sea, which sharpened their understanding of natural patterns over many years. Environmental awareness also helped sailors estimate location during long journeys. Different regions often possess different combinations of weather, wildlife, and ocean conditions. Certain birds appear more commonly near coastlines, while changing water color or wave behavior may reflect shallower regions closer to land. Sailors combine these observations gradually while building a broader picture of where they might be relative to their intended route. Imagine a Viking ship moving through northern water beneath heavy clouds, while distant birds circle above dark waves, and the wind carries the scent of wet coastline from somewhere beyond the horizon. None of these details alone provides exact direction, yet together they begin forming a larger environmental picture, suggesting nearby land and changing geography ahead. This process resembles how experienced travelers learn unfamiliar cities over time. At first, every street appears confusing and disconnected. Eventually, however, repeated movement reveals patterns between neighborhoods, landmarks, and roads until orientation becomes much easier. Sailors developed similar familiarity with ocean environments through voyages across northern seas. The natural world also reflects geography in subtle ways. Different coastlines influence weather patterns, while islands affect bird movement and wave behavior. Sailors crossing open water gradually learned how living systems interacted with the environment. Animal behavior, ocean movement, and atmospheric conditions all carried traces of the landscapes shaping them nearby. One remarkable aspect of Viking navigation is how deeply connected it remained to direct human experience. Sailors learned by watching, remembering and comparing observations, rather than using written calculations or electronic measurements. Knowledge developed slowly through interaction with the sea itself. Navigation therefore became part practical skill and part environmental understanding shaped by years of observation. This awareness likely created a strong emotional connection between sailors and nature surrounding them. Modern technology often separates people from environmental patterns because systems quietly perform tasks automatically. Sailors remained closely tied to changing skies, ocean movement and wildlife because those observations directly influence safety and survival during every voyage. Nature also demands humility. Storms, fog and rough seas reminded sailors constantly that the environment could never be controlled completely. Viking navigation succeeded not because sailors dominated nature, but because they learned how to move within larger natural systems already unfolding around them. Observation became more valuable than force, because the ocean always remained stronger than the ship crossing it. The sea itself encouraged patience. Long stretches of travel beneath changing skies gave sailors long hours to observe clouds, waves, light, and wildlife, while gradually building deeper familiarity with the environment. Knowledge accumulated quietly through repetition rather than sudden discovery. Over many years, this repeated attention likely sharpened awareness far beyond what most modern people experience today. Picture a Viking ship traveling beneath pale northern clouds, while seabirds drift above distant waves and wind moves softly across the sail. The ocean stretches outward beneath shifting light, while sailors quietly observe every detail around them. Tiny changes in weather, water, and wildlife slowly gathering together into understanding. Navigation becoming less about finding one perfect answer and more about recognizing how countless natural patterns connect across the sea. The Vikings discovered that nature itself forms an interconnected system filled with information. Birds, waves, clouds, and changing light all reflected geography and environmental conditions beyond visible distance. Through memory, patience, and close observation of the living world around them, sailors expanded their understanding of the ocean while learning how to travel through it with remarkable skill and awareness. The success of Viking navigation depended not only on observation and awareness, but also on the remarkable design of the ships themselves. A sailor may understand the stars, waves, and wind perfectly, yet without a vessel capable of surviving difficult seas, long travel would remain extremely dangerous. Viking ships were carefully built for movement across northern seas, where weather could change rapidly, and rough seas tested both sailors and vessels continuously. One of the most important qualities of Viking ships was their relatively lightweight construction. Compared with many heavier vessels from later periods, Viking ships remained flexible and efficient while moving through the water. This lighter design allowed ships to travel faster and respond more smoothly to changing ocean conditions. Rather than fighting against the movement of the sea, the ships worked with the water beneath them. Modern boat builders still understand the importance of balance between strength and flexibility. A vessel that becomes too rigid may struggle during rough conditions because the ocean constantly pushes and twists against the hull. Viking shipbuilders developed designs capable of bending slightly with waves while remaining strong enough for difficult voyages. This flexibility helped ships survive long journeys through northern waters. The shape of the hull also mattered greatly. Viking ships often featured long, narrow designs that moved efficiently through waves while maintaining stability across shifts. The curved structure of the hull helped distribute force from the water more evenly as the ship rose and fell with the ocean beneath it. Sailors therefore traveled in vessels specifically adapted for the environments they crossed regularly. Imagine standing near the shoreline, watching a Viking ship move across dark water beneath grey skies. The hull rises gently with each passing wave, while the narrow shape cuts steadily through the sea, instead of crashing heavily against it. Wind fills the sail, while cold ocean spray drifts across the deck, and the ship continues forward with smooth, controlled movement through the open water. The ability to maintain stability supported navigation directly. Sailors trying to observe stars, sunlight, or distant horizons needed ships capable of moving predictably through waves rather than rolling violently in every direction. A more stable vessel allowed better observation of the environment while also improving safety on long voyages away from land. Steering systems also played an important role. Viking ships used steering oars mounted along the side of the vessel to guide direction through changing wind and waves. Maintaining a course at sea required continuous adjustment because currents and weather constantly influenced movement. Sailors worked together with the ship itself while responding to the sea around them. Another remarkable feature involved the shallow depth of many Viking vessels. These ships could travel through coastal waters, rivers, and shallower areas that might prevent larger vessels from moving safely. This flexibility allowed sailors to explore many different environments while connecting open sea travel with inland waterways and coastal settlements. Modern transportation systems still depend heavily on specialized engineering adapted to specific environments. Aircraft designed for long travel differ greatly from small local planes, while ships crossing polar regions require different construction compared with vessels operating in warmer, calmer seas. Viking shipbuilders developed their own practical solutions through generations of experience with northern oceans and coastal waters. The materials used in shipbuilding reflected the natural resources available across Scandinavia. Wood from northern forests provided the foundation for these vessels, while skilled craftsmanship shaped individual pieces carefully into flexible, seaworthy hulls. Building such ships required enormous labor, knowledge, and cooperation, because every part of the vessel needed to function together successfully at sea. Life aboard these ships demanded endurance. Space remained limited, while sailors lived exposed to wind, ocean spray, and weather shifts on long voyages. Yet the ships themselves created a kind of moving shelter, carrying people across environments that otherwise would feel vast and isolating. Sailors likely developed deep trust in their vessels, because survival often depended on the quality of the ship beneath them. The relationship between sailor, ship, and sea became deeply interconnected. Navigation depended on awareness, while the vessel translated that understanding into physical movement across the water. Wind filled the sail, while the hull responded to waves, and sailors adjusted steering according to shifts. Every voyage required cooperation between human observation, ship design, and the forces of nature surrounding them. There is something deeply striking about imagining these wooden ships crossing cold northern seas beneath changing skies. long, narrow hulls moving steadily through dark water, while sails stretch against the wind, and waves roll beneath the vessel without rest. Sailors standing quietly along the deck, studying the horizon, while the ship itself responds smoothly to the movement of the ocean around it. The Vikings built ships that supported exploration across long distances because the vessels themselves became part of the navigation system. Lightweight, flexible hulls improved movement through waves, while stability supported observation on long voyages. Through skilled craftsmanship and generations of experience, Viking ship design allowed sailors to travel farther across northern oceans than many people of their time could have imagined possible. Viking ships were designed to respond naturally to the forces surrounding them at sea. Wind pushed against the sail, while waves lifted the hull and currents moved beneath the surface of the water. A successful voyage depended on understanding how all of these forces interacted together rather than trying to overpower the ocean completely. Sailors learned how to guide the ship through shifts, while allowing the vessel itself to work with the movement of the sea. Wind became an important source of power during long journeys. Large sails captured moving air and transformed that invisible force into steady forward motion at sea. Sailors needed strong awareness of wind direction because the angle of the sail influenced how efficiently the ship could travel. A favorable wind could carry a vessel smoothly across long distances, while shifting weather sometimes forced sailors to adjust their course or slow their movement considerably. Modern sailing vessels still depend on many of these same principles. Even with advanced materials and equipment available today, sailors continue studying wind patterns carefully because movement across water remains deeply connected to the atmosphere above it. Sailors developed understanding through practice rather than scientific measurement. They learned how different winds affected speed, balance, and steering on long voyages across northern seas. The movement of water also shaped the behavior of the ship constantly. Waves rolled beneath the hull, while currents pushed against the vessel from below. Viking ships needed enough flexibility to respond smoothly to these conditions without becoming unstable. The ocean never remained still, meaning sailors continuously adjusted to changing movement during every stage of the journey. Steering required attention and cooperation. Viking ships used large steering oars mounted near the side of the vessel to guide direction through waves and wind. Maintaining a steady course at sea was not a simple matter of pointing the ship once and relaxing afterward. The sea continuously influenced movement, while sailors responded through careful steering and observation of the environment. Imagine standing near the stern of a Viking ship while cold northern wind presses against the sail and dark waves move steadily beneath the hull. The steering oar shifts gently against the force of the water, while the ship rises and falls through long rolling waves. Ahead stretches open sea beneath low grey clouds, while sailors maintain steady direction through patience and constant adjustment. One remarkable feature of Viking travel was the steady rhythm created by wind and ocean movement working together. During favorable conditions, ships could move smoothly for long periods, while waves and sail remained balanced against one another. This rhythm likely shaped daily life aboard the vessel because sailors spent countless hours surrounded by the repeating sounds of water, wood, and wind. Exploration depended heavily on this combination of ship design and environmental understanding. Sailors crossed difficult northern waters, because their vessels allowed reliable movement through shifts, while observation supported navigation away from land. Without ships capable of responding effectively to the sea, exploration across open sea would have remained far more dangerous and uncertain. Modern people often think of exploration as dramatic moments of discovery, yet much of Viking travel probably felt slower and quieter in reality. Days at sea involved steady movement beneath changing skies, while sailors monitored wind, waves, and direction continuously. The success of these journeys came not from sudden bursts of speed, but from endurance, patience, and the ability to maintain controlled movement across long distances. Ship design also supported flexibility during travel. Viking vessels could adapt to shifts more easily than heavier, less responsive ships, because their lightweight structure allowed quicker adjustments to wind and wave movement. This responsiveness helped sailors maintain control even when weather shifted unexpectedly across the ocean. The sound of the ship itself likely became familiar to experienced sailors. Wood creaked softly while water moved against the hull and wind pressed through the sail overhead. Changes in these sounds could reveal shifts because the vessel responded physically to the environment surrounding it. Sailors probably developed strong awareness of these subtle details through years spent at sea. The sea rewards balance more often than force. Viking ships succeeded partly because they moved with the ocean instead of attempting to resist every movement completely. Wind filled the sail, while the hull flexed with waves, and sailors adjusted steering according to shifts. Navigation therefore depended on cooperation with nature rather than domination over it. There is something deeply peaceful about imagining a Viking ship traveling steadily through northern water, beneath heavy clouds and pale light. Wind stretching softly through the sail, while long waves roll beneath the hull, and the steering oar moves gently against the sea. Sailors maintaining quiet attention to direction, while the vessel responds naturally to the ocean surrounding it. The Vikings built ships capable of responding gracefully to wind and water because survival at sea demanded flexibility and control. Steering systems, sail design, and lightweight hulls all supported steady movement on long voyages across northern oceans. Through careful craftsmanship and understanding of the sea, sailors transformed wooden ships into reliable tools for exploration, navigation, and survival away from land. For sailors, navigation depended heavily on memory because there were no modern charts, electronic maps, or digital systems recording exact positions across the ocean. Knowledge lived inside the minds of experienced travelers who spent years learning routes, weather patterns, and environmental signs through voyages. Every successful journey added more understanding, while memory gradually became one of the most valuable tools aboard the ship. Modern people rarely need to memorize long routes with the same intensity, because technology now performs much of that work automatically. A phone can guide someone through unfamiliar streets instantly, while satellites calculate position with astonishing precision. Sailors experienced a different reality. Once a ship moved beyond visible land, memory and observation became deeply connected because previous experience helped sailors interpret their environment. Learning ocean routes required repetition. A sailor crossing northern waters for the first time might recognize little beyond general direction and weather conditions. After many voyages, however, patterns became more familiar. Certain winds appeared during specific seasons, while waves behaved differently near particular coastlines and islands. Repeated travel slowly transformed uncertainty into understanding, built through experience. This process resembles how people gradually learn familiar roads or neighborhoods through repetition today. At first, an unfamiliar city may feel confusing and difficult to navigate. Over time, however, memory begins connecting landmarks, turns and distances together until movement becomes almost automatic. Sailors developed this same kind of familiarity across the sea itself, though their environment remained far larger and more dangerous than most modern travel. Memory also helps sailors estimate time and distance during voyages. Experienced navigators learned how long certain routes typically required under different weather conditions, while changes in wind or wave patterns suggested whether the ship remained close to its intended course. Without clocks or electronic instruments providing exact measurements, practical experience became essential for judging movement at sea. Imagine a Viking sailor standing quietly near the edge of the ship during a cold northern evening, while pale light fades slowly across dark waves. The sailor studies the horizon and wind, while remembering similar conditions from earlier voyages completed years before. Tiny details in weather, water, and sky begin connecting to older experiences stored in memory. Navigation becoming less about guessing and more about recognizing familiar patterns returning once again. Knowledge at sea was rarely kept by one individual alone. Viking navigation depended on shared experience passed carefully between sailors over many years. Older navigators likely taught younger crew members how to interpret waves, stars, birds, and weather conditions, while stories about dangerous coastlines and successful routes preserved information across generations. This transfer of knowledge helped improve accuracy over time. Every voyage added more experience, while journeys refined understanding of the environment. Mistakes became lessons, while successful crossings strengthened confidence in certain methods and observations. Viking navigation therefore evolved gradually through accumulated human experience rather than sudden invention. Modern professions still depend heavily on this kind of practical learning. Experienced pilots, sailors, and mountain guides often possess awareness that extends beyond written instructions because repeated exposure sharpens judgment over time. Sailors developed similar expertise through countless hours spent observing northern oceans during difficult voyages. Memory also supported emotional resilience during long journeys. Familiar routes and repeated patterns helped sailors remain calmer during uncertain conditions because previous experience provided reassurance that difficult weather or changing seas could still be navigated successfully. Human beings often feel more confident when situations connect to familiar memories rather than complete uncertainty. The oral nature of Viking culture likely strengthened this dependence on memory even further. Important information about navigation, geography, and ocean travel may have been shared primarily through spoken teaching and repeated storytelling rather than written documents. Sailors therefore carried knowledge directly within communities connected to the sea. One fascinating aspect of this system is how deeply human it remained. Viking navigation depended on attention, memory, and shared experience rather than mechanical precision. Knowledge lived within observation and conversation, while sailors gradually built understanding through years of direct contact with the ocean itself. There is a quieter feeling within this kind of learning that differs greatly from modern technology. Picture experienced sailors speaking softly aboard a Viking ship beneath cold evening skies, while younger crew members listened carefully to observations about wind, stars, and distant coastlines. Memory passing from one generation to another, while the ship continues through dark water, guided by knowledge earned through countless earlier voyages. The Vikings discovered that memory could become a powerful navigation tool when combined with patience and repeated experience. Routes grew more familiar, while environmental patterns became easier to interpret over time. Through shared knowledge, careful observation, and generations of accumulated learning, sailors developed remarkable skill in crossing northern seas long before modern systems existed. Viking navigation did not appear suddenly as one finished system fully understood from the beginning. It developed gradually over many years through voyages, observation, and accumulated experience shared between sailors. Every journey across the ocean added new understanding, while mistakes, successes, and shifts slowly shaped more reliable methods of travel. Navigation became a process of continuous learning because the sea itself constantly changed, while human knowledge expanded little by little over time. This gradual development is common throughout human history. Most practical systems begin through simple observation before becoming more refined through repetition and shared experience. Farmers improve techniques over generations, while builders learn stronger methods through repeated construction. Sailors followed a similar path. Their understanding of stars, sunlight, waves, and weather likely became more detailed and dependable as knowledge passed from one voyage to the next. Modern people sometimes imagine earlier navigation as mysterious or instinctive, yet much of it probably resembled careful practical learning shaped by patience and repetition. Sailors observed the environment continuously, while comparing present conditions against memories from earlier journeys. Over time, these observations formed increasingly reliable systems for maintaining direction across difficult northern waters. Learning at sea never truly stopped because the environment remained unpredictable. New weather conditions, unfamiliar coastlines, or changing ocean movement constantly introduced fresh challenges during travel. Experienced sailors therefore remained observant and adaptable rather than assuming they already understood everything completely. The ocean rewarded awareness because conditions could shift rapidly even during familiar routes. Imagine a Viking ship crossing northern water beneath low grey clouds, while sailors quietly discuss changing winds and wave movement. One sailor remembers similar conditions from an earlier voyage, while another notices subtle differences in the sea ahead. Knowledge growing gradually through conversation, observation, and memory, while the ship continues steadily through the open sea. Continuous learning improved future travel because every voyage strengthened environmental understanding. Sailors became better at recognizing weather patterns, while experience sharpened interpretation of stars, waves, and bird behavior. Routes once considered dangerous or uncertain gradually became more manageable as accumulated knowledge increased confidence and accuracy over time. This process resembles how experienced craftspeople improve through repetition today. A skilled carpenter or musician often develops abilities slowly across many years rather than through sudden mastery. Viking navigation followed the same pattern. Expertise emerged through direct experience repeated countless times beneath changing skies and ocean conditions. Memory shaped Viking movement across the sea because earlier voyages influenced future decisions continuously. Sailors remembered dangerous coastlines, shifting currents and favorable routes while passing these lessons forward to younger generations. The ocean itself became familiar through accumulated experience, even though conditions never remained perfectly identical from one journey to the next. One important aspect of this learning involved recognizing which observations remained dependable. Certain stars returned predictably, while sunlight followed steady patterns across the sky. Waves reflected wind conditions, while birds often suggested nearby land. Sailors gradually learned which natural signs provided the most information under different circumstances. Navigation systems also became stronger because they combined many observations together instead of relying on one single method alone. Clouds might hide the stars while fog obscured the horizon, yet waves, wind, and memory could still provide guidance. Sailors survived difficult voyages, partly because their understanding remained flexible enough to adapt when conditions changed. Modern navigation technology often creates the impression that certainty must always be immediate and exact. Sailors worked within a different relationship with the world. Direction emerged gradually through interpretation and awareness rather than instant calculation. This slower process demanded patience because understanding developed through observation gathered over long periods of time. The ocean itself likely encouraged humility during this learning process. Storms, rough seas, and sudden weather changes reminded sailors constantly that no system could remove uncertainty completely. Experience improved judgment, yet the sea always remained powerful and unpredictable. Viking navigation succeeded because sailors adapted continuously rather than assuming complete control over nature. Knowledge carried through communities connected to the sea. Sailors returning from voyages brought back understanding about routes, weather, and ocean conditions, while younger travelers listened carefully to these experiences. Over generations, this shared learning helped create increasingly sophisticated methods for crossing large stretches of open water. There is something deeply human about imagining this slow accumulation of knowledge across centuries of northern travel. Wooden ships moving steadily beneath changing skies, while sailors compare memories, observations, and experience gathered from earlier voyages. Navigation evolving quietly through countless moments of attention and learning rather than through sudden invention or dramatic discovery. The Vikings developed reliable navigation systems because they treated the ocean as a place of continuous learning. Every voyage strengthened memory, while observation refined understanding of stars, sunlight, waves, and weather. Through patience, shared knowledge, and generations of accumulated experience, sailors gradually built the skills necessary for remarkable journeys across the cold northern seas. Weather shaped nearly every aspect of Viking navigation because the ocean and atmosphere remain deeply connected. Clouds, wind, rain, and changing visibility could alter travel conditions quickly across northern seas. A calm voyage beneath clear skies might slowly transform into rough seas and heavy cloud cover within only a short period of time. Sailors therefore needed constant awareness, because successful navigation depended not only on knowing direction, but also on adapting to weather conditions during the journey. Clear skies made navigation far easier. Sunlight revealed orientation during the day, while stars provided valuable guidance after sunset. The horizon remained visible across long distances, while wave patterns could be observed more clearly from the deck of the ship. During these calmer conditions, sailors could compare many environmental clues together while maintaining steadier confidence in their direction. Clouds created one of the greatest challenges at sea. Because they could hide the sources of information sailors depended upon most. Thick cloud cover obscured the sun during daylight, while nighttime stars disappeared behind dark weather systems. Sailors crossing open sea could suddenly lose some of their most reliable references while the ship continued moving through waves and wind beneath uncertain skies. Modern people still experience how dramatically weather can alter visibility. Fog can erase distant landmarks, while storms transform familiar landscapes into confusing environments filled with shifting shadows and limited sight. Sailors face these challenges away from land, where no roads, buildings, or lights remained visible to restore orientation. Observation became more difficult, precisely when conditions also became more dangerous. Wind patterns also changed continuously across the sea. Favorable winds might carry a ship steadily forward for long periods, while sudden shifts forced sailors to adjust sails and direction carefully. Strong winds created rougher waves, while changing air movement influenced both the speed and stability of the vessel during travel. Sailors therefore studied wind closely because it affected nearly every part of the voyage. Imagine standing aboard a Viking ship beneath dark northern clouds, while cold rain drifts across the deck and distant waves rise heavily beneath the hull. The horizon fades behind mist, while sunlight disappears overhead, and strong wind presses hard against the sail. Sailors adjusting ropes and steering carefully, while searching for small environmental clues hidden inside the storm surrounding them. Visibility could change rapidly, even without major storms. Northern oceans often experience mist, low clouds, and shifting weather that soften the horizon or blur the distinction between sea and sky. During these conditions, sailors needed greater reliance on memory, wave movement, and practical experience, because visual navigation became far more uncertain. This type of environmental adaptation resembles how experienced mountain climbers respond to weather shifts today. Clear skies may allow easy movement and orientation, while fog or snowfall forces slower, more careful travel. Sailors developed similar flexibility because ocean conditions could never be controlled completely. Survival depended on adjusting continuously to the environment rather than expecting perfect conditions at all times. Weather also influenced emotional experience on long voyages. Calm seas and clear skies often created peaceful, steady travel, while storms introduced tension and physical exhaustion. Sailors likely developed strong emotional discipline because fear and panic make observation more difficult during dangerous conditions. Remaining calm supported clearer judgment, while rough weather tested both sailors and ships continuously. One remarkable aspect of Viking navigation is how resilient it remained despite these challenges. Sailors could continue navigating even when clouds obscured stars and sunlight, because their system relied on many forms of awareness working together. Waves, wind, memory, and ship movement still provided information when visibility became poor. The northern seas demanded respect because weather could change with astonishing speed. Calm water might gradually darken beneath approaching storms, while strong wind and rough waves transformed the ocean into a far more dangerous environment. Sailors survived, partly because they accepted this uncertainty, rather than assuming nature would remain predictable. Modern navigation technology reduces some of these risks through forecasting and electronics, yet weather still influences ocean travel strongly even today. Ships continue adjusting routes around storms, while pilots and sailors remain highly aware of changing visibility and wind conditions. Sailors face these same realities with far fewer tools available beyond observation and experience. Picture a Viking ship continuing steadily through cold rain while heavy clouds move across the northern sky and waves rise dark beneath the hull. Sailors quietly adapting to each shift in weather while the sea changes color and texture around them. Navigation becoming an act of patience and resilience, where every small observation matters more as conditions grow increasingly uncertain. The Vikings understood that weather could either support or challenge every ocean journey. Clouds, wind, and changing visibility constantly influenced navigation, while sailors adapted carefully to hard conditions across northern seas. Through experience, flexibility, and close awareness, Viking navigation remained possible even when storms and darkness obscured many of the natural signs guiding direction at sea. Sailors understood that the ocean could change faster than almost any other environment they encountered. A clear horizon could disappear behind fog, while calm water slowly transformed beneath rising wind and darkening skies. Navigation therefore depended heavily on flexibility, because no single method worked perfectly under every condition. Sailors needed to adjust constantly while combining memory, observation, and awareness together as the sea shifted around them. One of the greatest strengths of Viking navigation was that it relied on many different forms of information working together instead of one fragile system alone. If clouds covered the stars, sailors could still study waves and wind. If fog obscured the horizon, memory and ocean movement might continue providing guidance. During daylight, sunlight revealed orientation, while nighttime offered patterns in the stars overhead. Sailors survived difficult journeys partly because they adapted continuously, instead of depending on any single clue. Modern navigation systems are often designed with similar layers of support. Aircraft contain backup systems, while ships carry multiple instruments in case one fails during dangerous conditions. Sailors develop their own version of this layered awareness through direct experience with the natural world. The environment itself became a network of overlapping signals, helping maintain direction even when certain conditions became difficult. Adaptation at sea required calm judgment. Sudden weather changes could create confusion if sailors reacted impulsively instead of observing carefully. Viking navigators likely learned that patience often improved survival, because rough conditions rarely remained stable forever. Storms passed while clouds shifted, and visibility eventually returned. Remaining attentive during uncertain moments became just as important as navigation during calm weather. Imagine a Viking ship moving through heavy northern fog while cold moisture settles across the deck and the horizon vanishes almost entirely into pale grey distance. Waves continue lifting the hull, while wind presses softly against the sail, and sailors listen closely to the movement of the sea around them. Even without clear visibility, the ship still moves forward, guided by memory, wave direction, and the quiet discipline of accumulated experience. The ability to adapt also depended on understanding how natural systems connected together. Wind influences waves while clouds reflect weather shifts, and birds respond to nearby geography. Sailors gradually learned how these environmental relationships interacted because recognizing connections helped improve decision-making during uncertain conditions. This type of flexible thinking remains important in many difficult environments today. Experienced mountain climbers, pilots and sailors all understand that conditions can change rapidly, while strict dependence on one method may become dangerous. The safest travelers usually remain observant and adaptable rather than rigid. Viking navigation followed this same principle across northern oceans. Ocean travel also demanded physical endurance. Long voyages exposed sailors to cold temperatures, rough seas, wet conditions, and exhaustion, while maintaining attention to navigation continuously. Adaptation therefore involved more than environmental understanding alone. Sailors themselves needed resilience because fatigue and discomfort could make observation and decision-making far more difficult during dangerous conditions. The sea rewards awareness because conditions often change gradually before becoming severe. Small differences in wind, wave movement, or cloud formation may suggest larger changes developing beyond the visible horizon. Sailors likely spent long hours quietly observing these transitions while learning how earlier signs connected to later weather and ocean conditions. Flexibility also helped prevent fear from taking control during uncertainty. Open ocean travel can feel unsettling because the environment remains vast and constantly moving, while weather shifts unpredictably around the ship. Sailors learned how to continue functioning calmly, even when visibility disappeared or storms surrounded the vessel. Experience created confidence because repeated survival through hard conditions strengthened trust in their methods and judgment. One remarkable part of Viking navigation is how deeply it depended on cooperation between people and nature rather than attempts to dominate the environment. Sailors adjusted sails according to wind, while steering, responded to waves and routes changed, depending on weather conditions. Successful travel came through adaptation and awareness rather than force alone. The changing northern seas likely taught sailors humility as well. No amount of experience could remove uncertainty because the ocean always remained larger and more powerful than the ship crossing it. Viking navigation succeeded not through perfect control, but through the ability to respond intelligently when conditions shifted unexpectedly. There is a steady quietness in imagining experienced sailors working through uncertain weather together without panic. A Viking ship continuing through mist and wind, while waves strike softly against the hull and voices remain calm beneath low grey skies. Every sailor watching the environment carefully while the ship adjusts gradually to shifts out on the open sea. The Vikings developed navigation systems strong enough to survive changing environments because they remained flexible and adaptive. Weather, fog, waves and shifting wind all influenced travel, while sailors combined many forms of awareness together during difficult voyages. Through patience, resilience, and continuous observation, sailors learned how to keep moving across uncertain northern waters, even when nature concealed many of the usual signs guiding direction. By the later stages of a long Viking voyage, navigation became less about individual techniques and more about how every part of the environment connected together into one larger system of understanding. The stars, sunlight, wind, waves, birds, memory, and ship movement all worked together continuously while sailors interpreted shifts across the sea. Viking navigation succeeded because no single method stood alone. Direction emerged gradually through the combined awareness of nature, experience, and careful observation, unfolding together during every stage of the journey. The sky provided one layer of guidance. During clear daylight, the movement of the sun revealed orientation, while shadows shifted steadily across the deck of the ship. After sunset, familiar star patterns appeared overhead, while the North Star offered dependable direction beneath dark skies. Sailors learned how these repeating celestial patterns connected to movement across the sea, because the sky remained one of the few stable systems available within an environment defined by constant motion. The ocean formed another layer of information beneath the ship. Waves reflected wind conditions, while currents quietly influenced travel across long distances. Experienced sailors noticed how the rhythm of the sea changed according to weather and geography, while the movement of water itself revealed subtle clues about the environment. Sailors therefore watched the sea almost constantly, because the ocean carried information as surely as the sky above it. Birds and wildlife added further understanding on long voyages. Certain seabirds suggested nearby coastlines, while changing animal activity sometimes reflected shifting environmental conditions. Sailors learned that living systems often respond to geography and weather in recognizable ways. Even small signs of animal movement could become meaningful after many days surrounded by open water and empty horizon. Memory connected all of these observations together. Sailors compared present conditions against earlier voyages, while repeated experience sharpened their interpretation of stars, waves, and weather over time. Navigation therefore depended not only on what sailors observed in the moment, but also on years of accumulated understanding, carried through memory and shared knowledge between generations. Modern navigation systems often divide information into separate instruments and measurements. Sailors experienced the world differently. The environment itself acted as one connected system where light, water, wind, and living creatures all influenced one another continuously. Successful navigation required understanding relationships rather than isolated facts alone. Imagine a Viking ship crossing northern water beneath fading evening light, while long waves roll steadily beneath the hull and distant seabirds move across the horizon toward unseen coastline. The wind shifts slightly colder, while familiar stars slowly begin appearing overhead as darkness settles across the sea. Sailors quietly comparing every detail around them against memories gathered from earlier voyages. Direction emerging gradually through the combination of countless small observations working together at once. Ship design also played an important role within this larger system. Flexible hulls responded smoothly to waves, while sails captured changing wind, and steering oars maintained direction through shifting ocean conditions. The vessel itself became part of navigation because sailors experienced the sea through the movement of the ship beneath them. Changes in water, wind, and weather could often be felt physically through the hull long before they became fully visible. The emotional endurance required for this kind of navigation was remarkable. Sailors crossed long distances surrounded by uncertainty while relying on observation and experience instead of precise electronics. Fear, exhaustion, and rough weather could all interfere with judgment, yet repeated voyages strengthened confidence because sailors learned that nature follows patterns even when conditions appear chaotic at first. This relationship with the natural world created a different form of awareness than most people experience today. Modern technology often separates human beings from direct environmental observation because electronics quietly perform many tasks automatically. Sailors remain deeply connected to the sky, sea, and weather because those observations directly shape survival during every journey. One fascinating aspect of Viking navigation is how balanced it remained between certainty and uncertainty. Sailors never possessed perfect information while crossing open sea, yet they gathered enough understanding from many different environmental clues to continue moving with confidence across difficult northern waters. Navigation became an art of interpretation, shaped by patience and resilience, rather than exact calculation alone. The northern seas themselves helped shape this knowledge over generations. Harsh weather, cold water, and changing visibility demanded practical skill because mistakes at sea could become dangerous quickly. Sailors refined their methods through exposure to these hard conditions, while accumulated experience gradually strengthened the reliability of their navigation systems. Picture a long wooden ship traveling through dark water beneath stars and drifting clouds, while wind stretches softly across the sail. Waves move steadily beneath the hull, while sailors remain quietly attentive to every shift in sky, sea, and weather around them. No glowing instruments, no distant lights, only human beings surrounded by nature, finding direction through memory, observation, and trust in the patterns hidden throughout the world around them. The Vikings succeeded at ocean navigation because they learned how every part of the environment worked together as one interconnected system. Sunlight, stars, waves, birds, weather, memory, and ship design all contributed information guiding movement at sea. Through patience, adaptability, and generations of accumulated experience, sailors crossed northern seas using one of the most sophisticated natural navigation systems in the ancient world. The story of Viking navigation is ultimately a story about the relationship between human beings and the natural world. Long before satellites, compasses, and electronics guided movement across the planet, sailors crossed enormous northern oceans using observation, patience, and accumulated experience passed carefully between generations. The sea offered no roads or permanent markers, while weather changed constantly around the ship, yet sailors still managed to travel remarkable distances, guided mostly by sunlight, stars, waves, wind, and memory. What makes this achievement so fascinating is not simply that the Vikings traveled far across dangerous water. Human beings have always explored unfamiliar places throughout history. The remarkable part is how deeply Viking navigation depended on learning the patterns hidden within nature itself. Sailors studied the sky because the movement of sunlight and stars revealed orientation. They observed waves because the sea carried information about wind and weather beyond visible distance. They watched birds because living creatures often reflected nearby geography and changing environmental conditions. Navigation, therefore, became an act of careful listening rather than domination. Sailors succeeded because they paid attention to the world around them with extraordinary patience. Every part of the environment mattered. Clouds, wind direction, shifting light, wave rhythm, and distant wildlife all contributed small pieces of understanding on long voyages at sea. Direction emerged gradually through awareness rather than mechanical certainty. Modern technology has transformed navigation into something almost invisible for many people today. Phones instantly calculate routes, while aircraft cross oceans, guided by systems orbiting high above the Earth. These inventions are extraordinary, yet they also separate many people from direct awareness of nature surrounding them. Sailors experience travel differently. The sky, sea, and weather remained constant companions because observation itself formed the foundation of survival. The northern oceans connected to Viking travel were not gentle environments. Cold water, storms, fog, and changing winds tested both sailors and ships continuously. Long voyages demanded physical endurance, while emotional resilience became equally important during hard conditions away from land. Sailors likely spent countless nights surrounded only by darkness, waves, and distant stars, while trusting their memory and environmental understanding to guide them safely onward. Imagine the silence that may have existed during calmer portions of these journeys. A Viking ship moving steadily beneath pale northern starlight, while dark water rolls softly beneath the hull and cold air drifts across the deck. No engines vibrating through the ship, no electronic signals or artificial light surrounding the sailors. Only the sound of waves, wind, and wood moving together through the open sea. Ship design, awareness, and accumulated knowledge all work together continuously during these voyages. Flexible hulls responded to waves, while sails captured changing wind, and sailors interpreted stars, sunlight, and ocean movement around them. Viking navigation succeeded because every part of the system supported every other part. Human beings, ships, and nature remained closely connected during the journey. One remarkable aspect of this history is how much knowledge developed through repetition and memory rather than written instruction alone. Sailors learned from earlier voyages, while experienced navigators passed understanding forward to younger generations. Knowledge accumulated slowly over many years as repeated exposure to the sea refined judgment and strengthened practical skill. Viking navigation, therefore, became a living tradition shaped by direct experience with the ocean itself. Even today, many experienced sailors continue describing the sea as something that demands humility. Weather changes quickly, while waves and wind constantly remind travelers that nature remains more powerful than any individual crossing the water. Sailors likely understood this deeply because survival relied on adapting to the environment rather than assuming complete control over it. The Vikings also revealed something important about human curiosity and determination. Crossing oceans in wooden ships without modern navigation required courage, patience, and trust in accumulated knowledge. These journeys connected distant coastlines and expanded understanding of the wider world long before modern transportation existed. Human beings continued exploring because curiosity pushed them beyond familiar horizons despite uncertainty and danger. There is a calming rhythm hidden within the world of Viking navigation. Sunlight crossing the sky each day, stars returning overhead each night, waves rising and falling endlessly beneath the hull, while wind moves steadily through the sail. Sailors learned how to travel inside these repeating natural cycles instead of fighting against them. Their journeys became part of the larger rhythms already unfolding across the sea and sky around them. Picture one final northern voyage unfolding beneath quiet evening light. A Viking ship moving steadily across dark water while pale clouds drift above the horizon and wind stretches softly through the sail. Sailors standing calmly along the deck, while familiar stars slowly emerge overhead one by one. The sea continues moving endlessly beneath the hull, while the ship carries human memory, observation, and experience forward across the open sea. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about how sailors cross the northern seas using sunlight, stars, waves, weather, and the quiet natural patterns